I want to make a small confession at the start of this episode. For years, longer than I would like to admit, I did something that felt productive, something that felt like genuine English practice, something I could point to and say, yes, I am working on my English today. I listened. That was it. Just listened. Podcasts on my commute, English radio while cooking, audiobooks before sleeping, hours and hours of English audio, week after week, month after month. And I improved. Slowly, my comprehension got better, my vocabulary grew, passively, quietly. But my speaking, the thing I actually wanted to improve, stayed stubbornly, frustratingly behind, as if the listening was happening in a separate room from the speaking, as if all those hours of audio were feeding something that had no connection to the mechanism that produced sound from my own mouth. And then someone introduced me to shadowing, and more specifically, to what I now understand as active shadowing, and everything I thought I knew about language practice shifted. Not because shadowing is magic, it is not magic, but because it does something that passive listening, however many hours of it, simply cannot do. It builds muscle memory. And that distinction between absorbing language with your ears and producing it with your body is the entire subject of what we are thinking about today. Welcome to GreenTea English. Settle in, pour your tea, and let us begin. To understand why active shadowing works and why passive listening has a fundamental ceiling, we need to start with a question that sounds almost too simple to be worth asking. What is speaking? Not linguistically, not theoretically, but physically. What is actually happening in your body when you produce spoken language? The answer, when you look at it carefully, reveals why speaking is so much harder than listening, and why hours of listening, however rich and beneficial in other ways, cannot on its own develop the specific skill of speech. Speaking is a motor act. It involves the coordinated movement of approximately 100 muscles. Your diaphragm contracts to push air upward. Your larynx adjusts the tension of your vocal cords to produce pitch and voice. Your soft palate rises or falls to direct air through the mouth or nose. Your tongue, one of the most complex muscles in the human body, moves with extraordinary precision and speed to shape sounds. Your lips and teeth and jaw all participate in the articulation of each individual phoneme. And all of this happens simultaneously, automatically, at extraordinary speed. In a native speaker producing fluent speech, these movements happen at rates that the conscious mind cannot possibly direct in real time. They have been automated, drilled by years of unconscious repetition into something that runs below awareness, like the way a skilled pianist's fingers move without the pianist thinking about each individual key. This is motor memory, the storage of complex physical sequences not as explicit knowledge in the conscious mind, but as embodied skill in the body itself. And here is the critical insight for every English learner who has spent years listening without speaking. You cannot develop motor memory through listening. Not because listening is useless. Listening is essential. It builds comprehension. It trains your ear to the sounds and rhythms of the language. It provides the acoustic model that your speaking will eventually try to match. All of that is real and important. But motor memory, the physical automation of speech, requires physical practice. The muscles need to move, the sequences need to be repeated, the body needs to encode what the ears have been hearing. And passive listening, however many thousands of hours of it, gives your ears everything and your muscles nothing. This is why so many intermediate and advanced English learners find themselves in a strange and frustrating position. They understand native speakers well, they have extensive vocabulary, they read fluently, their grammar knowledge is strong, and yet when they speak, particularly under any kind of pressure or time constraint, the production feels slow, effortful, imprecise. Words that they can identify in an instant when listening take longer to find when speaking. Sounds that are clear to their ear feel awkward in their mouth. The ear is trained, the mouth is not. Passive listening built the acoustic model, the internal representation of what English should sound like, but it did not build the physical capacity to reproduce that model. This is where shadowing enters. Shadowing, in its basic form, is the practice of listening to a native speaker and speaking along simultaneously, not repeating after, not pausing to translate, but matching the speaker in real time, attempting to produce the sounds, rhythms, stress patterns, and intonation of the speaker at the same moment they produce them. It was developed originally as a technique for training conference interpreters, professionals who must not only understand a speaker in one language, but simultaneously reproduce their meaning in another. The skill demands an extraordinary level of automaticity, and shadowing was found to build that automaticity faster than almost any other technique. Language teachers later adapted it for general language learning, and the results, for learners who practice it consistently, are striking. But there is a version of shadowing that most people practice, and then there is what I want to call active shadowing, and the difference between them is not small. Most people who try shadowing treat it as an imitation exercise. They choose a recording, they play it, they try to copy the sounds they hear. Their attention is on reproduction, on getting the sounds right, on keeping up with the speed, on not falling too far behind. And this produces some benefit. The mouth is moving, the muscles are engaging, some motor memory is being built. But this version of shadowing has a problem. The attention is primarily external. It is focused on the input, on what the speaker is saying, rather than on the output, on what your own mouth is producing. Active shadowing reverses this orientation. In active shadowing, you are not primarily trying to copy the speaker, you are primarily monitoring your own production. The speaker becomes a reference, a model, against which you are comparing your own output in real time. This distinction matters enormously, because the feedback loop that builds motor memory most efficiently is not hear target sound, attempt to reproduce. It is hear target sound, attempt to reproduce, immediately notice the gap between your production and the target, adjust, try again. That loop, target, attempt, notice, adjust, is how skills are refined in every domain. How a musician develops intonation, how a dancer develops timing, how a surgeon develops precision. The expert is not simply repeating movements. The expert is monitoring the gap between what they are doing and what they are aiming for, and using that gap as information. Most language learners never learn to listen to their own production while producing it. They are either listening to input or producing output, but almost never doing both simultaneously with clear, focused attention on both. Active shadowing trains exactly this dual attention, and it is harder than it sounds, significantly harder than passive shadowing, because you are asking your mind to hold two streams of audio at once, what you are hearing and what you are producing, and compare them in real time. Let me describe what active shadowing looks like in practice, because I think the description reveals why it works. You choose a short passage of native English speech. Short is important, 30 seconds to 2 minutes maximum. The material should be slightly above your comfort level, but not incomprehensible, and it should be speech you find interesting. Motivation matters enormously for this kind of practice. You listen to the passage once without doing anything, simply absorbing it, getting a feel for the rhythm, the pace, the emotional tone, noticing where the speaker breathes, where the stress falls, what the intonation does at the ends of sentences. Then you play it again, and this time you speak along, at the same speed, from the very first word, without waiting. And as you speak, you listen to yourself, not to check if you sound perfect, but to notice specific things. Is your rhythm matching? Are you consistently behind, rushing to catch up, which means your processing is slower than native speed? Where are the sounds that feel foreign in your mouth, the ones your muscles resist? Where does your intonation fall flat when the speaker's rises? These are not failures, they are data. They are the precise locations where your motor memory is currently incomplete. You repeat the passage, not identically, but with the specific gaps you noticed as your focus. You are not trying to be perfect on the third attempt, you are trying to be slightly more accurate than the second. And you do this every day with short passages, consistently for months. What happens in the body during this practice is worth describing. Each time you attempt to produce a sound sequence, even imperfectly, you are activating the neural pathways involved in that movement. Each attempt strengthens them slightly. Each attempt that is followed by comparison with the target, noticing the gap, adjusting, strengthens them further and more efficiently. Over weeks and months of consistent practice, something shifts. The sounds that felt foreign begin to feel familiar. The sequences that required conscious effort begin to run automatically. The mouth begins to anticipate the movements rather than react to them. This is motor memory developing, the same process by which any physical skill moves from deliberate and effortful to fluid and automatic. And then something remarkable begins to happen in regular conversation. The sounds and rhythms and intonation patterns that you have been practicing in shadowing begin to appear, unbidden in your spontaneous speech. Your prosody improves, your stress patterns sound more natural, your pace becomes steadier, you stop sounding as if you are translating from another language and begin sounding as if you are thinking in English. Because, in a sense, you are. The motor programs for English speech have been written more deeply into your body. The sounds are now available, not just as acoustic memories, things you recognize when you hear them, but as physical programs, movements your muscles know how to make. I want to address two objections that come up almost every time active shadowing is discussed. The first is, I cannot keep up, the speaker is too fast. This is almost universal among learners who try shadowing for the first time, and it reveals something important. Your audio processing speed, the rate at which you can decode incoming speech and convert it to production, is slower than native speed. This is expected, and it is precisely what shadowing trains. The solution is not to find slower material. Native speed is the target. The solution is to stay with the attempt even when you are falling behind, even when you miss words, even when entire phrases blur past you. because the attempt itself, the effort to keep up, is training the processing speed. Repeatedly attempting to operate at native speed gradually raises the ceiling of your own processing capacity. Over weeks and months of consistent practice, you will find yourself consistently further behind, and then you will find yourself falling behind less, and then you will find yourself keeping up. Not because the material got easier, but because you got faster. The second objection is, I am learning wrong pronunciation. I will reinforce my mistakes. This concern is understandable but somewhat misplaced, because the speaker you are shadowing provides an immediate and continuous model of correct production. You are comparing your output to a native reference in real time. Your errors are visible, audible to you in the moment of production. This is not the same as practicing alone with no model, where errors can be reinforced invisibly. In shadowing, the gap between your production and the target is always audible, and that audible gap is the feedback mechanism that corrects the error. The key is attention. If you shadow passively, going through the motions without genuinely listening to your own output, you will not benefit from this feedback mechanism. But if you shadow actively, with genuine dual attention on input and output simultaneously, the feedback loop is always present. I want to close with something about patience. Active shadowing does not produce dramatic results in a week. It produces subtle results that accumulate over months into something significant. In the first week, you will feel awkward and slow and far behind. This is correct. This is the gap between your current motor memory and the target. In the first month, you may notice that certain sounds feel slightly less foreign, that your rhythm is slightly more consistent. These are small signals of genuine change. In the third month, if you have been consistent, you may notice something in a real conversation, a moment when a phrase came out more naturally than expected, when your intonation did something right without you trying, when you sounded, briefly, more like the speaker you have been shadowing than like a learner trying to produce English. That moment is motor memory expressing itself. That moment is what the practice is building toward. And the distance between where you are now and that moment is not measured in study sessions. It is measured in repetitions, in short daily passages, spoken along with a model, listened to with genuine attention to your own output. Not passive consumption, not grammar tables, not vocabulary lists. The patient, physical, daily practice of producing the sounds of English with your own body and listening carefully to the gap between what you produce and what you are aiming for. That gap is not failure. That gap is exactly where the learning lives. Before you leave today, one practical thing. Find a short piece of native English speech, 30 seconds, something you find interesting. Play it once and listen, then play it again and speak along, from the first word, while listening to yourself as clearly as you listen to the speaker. Notice 3 things: where you fall behind, where a sound feels foreign in your mouth, where your intonation does something different from the model. Write those 3 things down. Those are the 3 things your motor memory is working on next. This is GreenTea English. Thank you for thinking carefully with me today. See you in the next one.